we'll be talking about empathy and confidence in the young learners classroom. And some of the things that we will be discussing are the exact topics of emotions, empathy, communication, confident communication, that is very related to the language teaching, but also I will add a bibliography for those of you who are very curious, and I'm hoping everyone is, because that's part of our role, right? Keep learning and keep moving. So a little bit of the context that ignites the research, and the context that actually gives me insight for the things we are going to discuss here. The first thing we have to say is that we're going to talk about children learning English. However, most of the things that we are going to see and talk about, even though it's a very quick webinar, they also relate, they may relate to teenagers and adults. We were talking earlier about the differences in generations and everything. And because some of us didn't have the opportunity to learn earlier, we might believe that it's too late, or might believe that shouldn't be taught at all, things like that. But in my opinion, even if we didn't have chances as young learners to develop social emotional skills in the classroom, why not try and teach ourselves? So this is also very, very important for us in the context here, okay? And the examples are drawn from children learning English and materials for children. I am a firm believer in the power of education, and I believe everyone watching now is also a dreamer in that sense. Otherwise, you wouldn't be online at whatever time it is in your country at the moment, watching a webinar instead of a Netflix series or any other thing that might catch our attention, right? This is our focus because we want to be better educators. And the power of education, I really want to say something about the power of education that I draw not only from research, but also from experience. Yesterday, as I was teaching this Delta session, one of the teacher students said, "But Marcela, don't you think that we can focus on the language, the grammar, the vocabulary, pronunciation for that matter, and discourse, because every other skill can be learned just as we go naturally. They are going to develop that. They're going to develop social emotional learning." And my answer to that is, yeah, partially going to develop, but they're going to develop randomly, perhaps not as much as they could. And the education is here, Vygotsky, to actually stretch this learning zone so that we can achieve higher. And it also goes for social emotional learning skills, all the skills that we talked about today in the other webinars. With education, if we are doing our jobs properly, for lack of a better word, we are actually engaging students into reaching more and being more active in their learning. Whereas if they are left to their own instincts or development on their own, they might not achieve that much, or they might not learn explicitly, or they might not be aware of certain things that need a bit of direction or a bit of support, a bit of help. And this is, for me, the superpower of education. In that sense, teachers are definitely core to the process of education or the development of children, even though there's a lot that they can learn from one another. The teacher that plans, prepares, and manages, facilitates the process is definitely going to be super help and going to help these children develop into greater human beings that are going to transform the world, as we mentioned earlier, right? But I have very important message for you. I'm super optimistic, as you might have noticed, but the optimism is not blind. And I can see the challenges, and I can see that there is a lot of pressure from society, from parents, from the school board, and everyone else who's not in the classroom, right? The suggestion here is that we look at the challenges as possibilities, as obstacles that we can overcome together as a group of professionals, not on our own as each teacher individually, but as a group like we're doing here, 500 of us thinking of possibilities for the world that might change the world. And a very brief reminder from my fellow Brazilian, whoever teaches learns in the act of teaching, and whoever learns teaches in the act of learning, meaning we teachers truly need to go to the classroom with an open heart, an open mind, to know that we're going to bring lots of learning to those students, but they're also going to teach us a lot about their own world, the differences. They're going to ask questions to which we probably know no answer to, and we're going to learn as well, okay? So I do hope we keep this in mind, not only during the webinar, but when we are teaching. And if you think differently, please let me know in the chat or in the questions, okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about emotions or their importance. Why do we talk about emotions, right? We talk about emotions and social and emotional skills and learning because children who develop those skills earlier are better equipped to cope with everyday challenges later on in life, not only academic, dealing with frustrations with their learning, stretching to learning needs accommodation of new knowledge, meaning it needs to break patterns that you were used to or the comfort zone going beyond. So academically, they would perform better if they're more prepared to deal with their own emotions, reactions, and socially as well, interacting with others, first with themselves, being kinder, being more understanding and aware of their own reactions, and then others in turn, and society, and so on and so forth. So socio-emotional driven curriculum might help them steer in a very, very changed society. Yeah. They also communicate better as they develop deeper understanding about their reactions and other people's reactions as well, not only our own reactions, but how they notice the world and how they can develop this empathy we're going to talk about, to perhaps not get into a discussion at that moment. Maybe the other person's not ready. So yes, we should try and understand that this is going to prepare them for be better communicators. They are going to manage decision-making, problem-solving, not only in school, in a very creative manner, because they reflect more critically, more collaboratively in different situations to produce different outcomes, something that we cannot predict. I think this is the biggest challenge for us teachers, because when dealing with social emotional skills in the classroom and allowing for problem solving, creative problem solving, collaboration, development of empathetic behavior, and the learning to deal with emotions, we do not know what the outcome will be, because we might be looking at a combination of emotions that was not anticipated or was not fully what we expected. So we need to be prepared for the unforeseeable classroom outcomes or unpredictable, right? Unpredictability is going to be very high, I believe. And at the same time, there is a great level of predictability as well. The more I develop repertoire in teaching and working with emotions. Now, something else about the emotions is that we can help them learn in the classroom about themselves and how to positively interact with others and to develop socially. This can be taught in the classroom, and especially in the language classroom. We're very, very lucky and privileged to be teaching the language in which they are going to express themselves. An example here would be teaching them adjectives to name their own emotions, and at the same time teaching them to notice their own bodies when they're younger, noticing their own bodies, and depending on culture and how they look at each other, little by little, looking at the other person to identify different parts, different emotions, touching their own bodies to understand heat, for example, or different reactions, different physical reactions that are going to give a name to what they are feeling, and they can understand better that their reaction just makes them human, and what to do about the reactions is what's going to come of that, right? And then when I'm talking about emotions at an individual level, later on working with empathy, because I want students to develop a more inclusive group of children or inclusive behavior for later on in life. And if they develop empathy at this very early age in the classroom with their learning of other subjects, they learn to appreciate diversity. And diversity here could be any sort of diversity. It's an open it's an open umbrella term for gender, ethnical diversity, accents, languages, different things. It will depend on the context, but understanding that they're all different and they're not better than anyone. For example, we're all human beings. At a certain level, we're all the same. So that would be a very good lesson in developing empathy. Or they will also develop healthy relationships because they can understand their own reactions, as in the first slide, for example, their own emotions, but also listen better and understand other people's reactions, other people's sentences or desires or needs for a game, if they're younger children, for a more complex game, if they're older children, or for a play, for a school setting, for a project, and for life, because that will be more and more complex as they develop, right? Also, they learn to communicate better. If I know that I have other people who are different from me, I will also, as a child and as a teenager and later on as an adult, I will also develop awareness to choose or to learn more language to be able to cope with different people and to expand my repertoire in what I can say, the questions I can ask, or what language may not be taken as respectful and things like that, and also providing a clearer picture of what I'm feeling now, to ask, please, I cannot talk about that right now, for instance. These things matter in the classroom, and they will surely matter in the future. This is what might change the world. Also, they can collaborate more effectively. Collaboration is a buzzword in education nowadays, but many of our projects or many of our situations, they're just putting pieces together and handing it over to the teacher, back to the teacher, or things like that, rather than having an outcome that was not my part, my peers, or whatever. It's the collection, but the collective agreement on something. And this is really hard to be done. If we start earlier with children, they're going to collaborate more effectively in the future. A very good example of developing empathy in the English language classroom here. Again, we're working with the feelings, giving names, nominating our feelings, for example. But if we look at the box here, what we can see in others' strengths. So at this point, I'm not looking at my own strengths, but I'm looking at others. So I'm encouraging my students to look at others and work together, rather than because that will come naturally to us. The question about what can be developed in a natural way, in a natural manner, yes, we can all naturally focus on the negatives. That's what we learn with psychology. But if we train ourselves to look at strengths, we might tip the scale back to a more equitable, a more empathetic world, and dealing with the classroom and others. So in this activity here, they're looking at each other and trying to find strengths, and that's how they collaborate. That's how they build healthier relationships, because they can see that everybody will bring something that can empower the whole group or the project or different ideas. Maybe not what you were expecting, maybe not your strength. We're all different, but by looking at the differences from a more positive perspective, we shift the paradigm there. Also, all the understanding of a more empathetic relationship in the classroom and talking about their emotions and their strengths, I will focus on confident communication. And let me just go back here. The confident communication is very important that we understand. Does not mean that I feel empowered and I feel like I'm the most important person in the world, therefore I can speak confidently. The opposite, I would say, confident communication is, I know that if I make a mistake, I belong to this group and I'll have support, but I belong and I can say something. That's the confidence that we want, or at least that I'm advocating for here. The confidence in a way that I can express myself, I can be myself, and I can rely on others to be themselves and to respond. And we're going to communicate more humbly and confidently at the same time. So if I'm encouraging social emotional learning together with language learning, children can learn to disagree, for example, in a respectful manner. Remember what I said in the beginning, I'm very optimistic, but it doesn't mean that I ignore or I'm blind to conflict. On the contrary, I know, I'm very much aware of all conflict, but the conflict doesn't have to become heated argument, discussion about something. It can be a more respectful disagreement and a more collaborative discussion, more productive discussion. The children are going to be better able to express their emotions, because we started earlier with vocabulary, with understanding their own bodies and everything. And they will learn to negotiate, because I understand that perhaps it's too much for me. I can say, I would like to take a break at this moment, or perhaps I need support from somebody else, asking for help, or asking a question, can we then do this, which is suggesting something different. It has to do with both the social emotional learning that is taking place in the language classroom. As I mentioned earlier, they're going to be able to be themselves, be proud of themselves, and feel that they also belong. If I'm doing a step-by-step, and mind you, I think I forgot to say it earlier on, it doesn't come quick. It is not going to be immediate. I mean, we need to be very patient with ourselves, with the children, with the world, because I won't see a different world in the next 5 years. But I know that there is some impact if I'm actively working on that, rather than just letting it flow like it would. Then there is no change, because the results, we know what the results are. That's what we did decades ago, right? And they will also collaborate and creatively solve problems. Problems that could be simpler for children. How are we going to arrange the desks for the next class to work as a group? I don't know. To more complex problems, how do we stop the ocean pollution, plastic or something, that they're going to have their own idea. So that depends on it. It has to be age appropriate, but little by little stretching the complexity. And they can do that because they're learning to express themselves and being more confident in expressing their ideas, even if the idea doesn't make any sense at first, right? An example of that, the task is at the bottom. They have to talk about trip and find a compromise, choose the right trip for the group that would be inclusive for the whole group. And basically, it's a speaking activity, and I can think of an English lesson that would have an English activity, a speaking activity for them to discuss, come to a conclusion. If I don't interfere with a social and emotional learning background, they might just use the language, do whatever, and the outcome is going to be exactly the same in the next group, because they're not really feeling that they belong. Whereas if I encourage them to put their ideas across and ask for different things, if they don't like it, just express it. I don't know how to cycle. I don't know how to ride a bike, or I don't really like hiking. Can we think of something else? So it's not only using the language, but being true to themselves and being part of the group and finding a compromise. Agreeing or disagreeing is the language, but they use it to actually find a compromise that will be fair, or actually includes everyone in the group, whatever the group I have, because it will depend. The outcomes, again, we're going to be talking about open outcomes. They will depend, right? Now, some practical ideas here to, I think Mabel mentioned bullying here. I will add an idea and be sure to talk about that, okay? And probably I said I sometimes can see, but I can see the questions when there are questions, because in the chat I get lost, okay? Okay, let's go for the ideas. So practical ideas. First one that I mentioned earlier on was to help students identify name feelings through pictures, through facial expressions, through their own bodies, through observing others, through talking about people they know, perhaps. Start with themselves, start with pictures, then with themselves, then with others in a more respectful way. Second practical tip, encouraging projects that require cooperation and an open outcome. The one we talked about earlier on, that was on finding a trip, getting a trip. I don't know what they're going to decide. It's an open outcome. It does not depend. It does not come from the teacher, because they will have to agree on something and cooperate, put things together, work on their strengths and everything. Then asking questions that encourage multiple perspectives. I find from experience and reading that it's also very helpful in terms of bullying, in helping them reflect a little bit more about their attitudes, their behavior and everything, that it will come up again later, but asking them how they think they would feel, how they think the other person felt, how they think someone else, it could be a famous character, for example, would feel, allows them to put themselves in other people's shoes and also reflect on their own, because sometimes, and I can give you some real examples, but for time constraints, I cannot do that many times. I have to remember not to tell many stories, but with children, I had once started with a question that was an 8-year-old children group. And I started with a question, how would you feel if you were in their situation and they were bullying, this one was bullying the other? And he said, but I don't think that was disrespectful at all. And for him, it was not. I mean, probably in his family, they talked like that and it would be fine. It's the same thing we're looking at nowadays, trying to change the wording and being more respectful with people. And then I asked him, okay, so let's shift this. How do you think that person felt? And he said, apparently offended, but I don't understand why. And then we opened up questions to find out why and what it could have caused, what the words meant and everything. It takes time, okay? It really takes time, but it's still, again, a bit of language, a bit of creativity, characters. If it doesn't work with a person that they can see, working with characters first. Movies back then, it was seriously Toy Story we were working on, and they would work on how the characters would feel to then go back to their own situation. It is a very, very helpful tool, but it takes time. And talking about characters, instead of choosing to teach about individual successes that will just keep the world going as it goes round, perhaps choosing characters or situations, footballers, people who are known for collaboration, for being empathetic, for being good communicators and part of a team rather than super individual success. That is usually a lot of exception or a lot of bullying throughout their lives to be the one that is out there rather than I'm here, but because of other people. So that might be very helpful as well. This is also very helpful on bullying, encouraging them to reflect on hurtful behavior or hurtful words, what the impact is, how they could say it differently if sometimes it's just, or if it's making fun of others, why is it so important for you, helping them reflect on their own needs to actually imbalance that, right? And helping them notice that they will achieve more with other people. It is not easy. Asking another practical ideas, asking for their help and their input on projects, questions, where it is applicable, because it's not always possible. Sometimes we just have to tell them, I'm sorry, I know you think the person was not heard, but they were. So we're asking for their input, but sometimes they need a bit of direction. But ideas for projects, what could we save this week? I don't know. Or questions like, creative questions. What color should we have on the wall, or should we have board open-ended questions and open, super open for their input on building the classroom, sort of activities that they enjoy. For example, this is actually giving them a voice and making them feel that they matter, not only to each other, but to the group, to the teacher as well in society, because that's, at the end of the day, this is what really matters. It's the whole mass of people, not only to each other. One very, very important thing in terms of developing empathy, helping them develop empathy, is avoiding the emphasis on competition. And I know there are external factors that do not allow for that, but grading students or giving them tasks and tests that will only allow for certain skills to show, or competitions, games that are more competitive than collaborative. These things are teaching them that you have to be better, and the other people, the other people's strengths do not matter unless they make me win. Whereas if I'm emphasizing collaboration more in their reports and the feedback that I give them rather than a grade, I might, and I will surely, focus on empathy, and that everybody has something that will be added to the equation here, and we're all going to build this together. Most importantly, oh, sorry, I skipped one. You see, Tito? Storytelling. That's why I was telling you many different stories, and we could be here for a long, long time, but Will would kill me. But storytelling helps children notice things that might not be obvious when they're thinking about their peers, or because they don't want to think about their peers at first, but they relate to films, they relate to characters, they relate to storyboards. That's why many of the good materials will come with a story for us to discuss, right? And finally, and most importantly, seriously, most importantly, we need to be a role model. If we want them to develop empathy and to be better communicators, we need to challenge ourselves to that in terms of practicing empathy, not only towards the children, but towards our peers, in the corridors, in our lives, because it comes out of our pores. We can try and teach whatever, but what we say, if it's not connected to what we are doing or how we are behaving in life, if it's disconnected, we're teaching them that, not what we are saying. So we really have to work on that, not to be robots or perfect people. That does not exist. We are still people, but also acknowledging our vulnerabilities and saying, I'm so sorry, I shouted at you. I lost control. Let's analyze my reaction here. Why not, right? And engage the children in also learning that sometimes we're going to react poorly, but we can still do something about it rather than pretend it didn't happen. And just a final possibility for a different world, just some words, and I'll leave the words here, not read them again, because I'm not that sleepy. But this is what I believe we could have, a more empathetic world, if we believe it can happen, and if we are willing to do the work and fight for it. Thank you very much. I know that Will is going to send you the PowerPoint later, so you're going to have the references. Thank you.
Wonderful. What an amazing talk. It's just, yeah, lovely. Just really nice little sort of journey through how to think about this. And I think for a lot of teachers, it is really, really difficult, isn't it? I mean, you spent a long time talking about inappropriate behavior. Well, sorry, I'm sorry if I've said that incorrectly, but you know, it's difficult, isn't it, for some teachers to react to those situations. And
because we were not taught like that. Yeah, we were not taught like that. So it's I think it's a lot more difficult for us than it is for the children who are now learning this, who will become teachers later. They will
Yes.
take it for granted, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we're all sort of teachers in some shape or form, and we sort of impart things to people, you know, knowledge and skills and attitudes to people in some shape or form or older. So every action we do is so important. It's got ripples, hasn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And I just think it's
does.
difficult for teachers to know with confidence that they are reacting in a sort of safe and productive way.
Yeah.
So thank you.